Good morning, Internet, and welcome to the IPython development meeting for the 7th of August 2014. We have not many people and quite a long agenda. A couple more people, Fernando and Brian, may be joining us in a bit, but we're going to launch straight into the agenda, I think. Shall we leave the PyCon 2015 question until we've got some of our more senior people here to discuss it with?
Good idea.
Okay, so loading math tracks over HTTPS. Yeah, there's not much that we actually need to discuss about this now. We thought there was a concerning thing that we thought it may be the case that the way Cloudflare does SSL certificates, it might allow people to do man-in-the-middle attacks, but I've dug into it and it seems it doesn't. So loading over HTTPS, as we now do in IPython 2.2, is sufficient security. So, hooray.
Yay.
So the -- script option, Min took it out in the NB format 4 PR, I believe.
Actually, I took it out in the content service PR because
that was it.
it makes it affect. I actually took it out in both PRs because both of them made it make even less sense than it did. I've since obviously rebased NB format 4 on content, so.
And yeah, then we got someone on the mailing list saying, hey, I was using that, essentially, and I noticed that we hadn't actually done a deprecation cycle. Hey, Paul's here.
Yeah, so the gist of it is in IPython.
We'll just get Paul plugged in.
In IPython pre 1.0, NB format could save as both JSON and Python.
So nobody else does it? Min and...
Yeah, that's it.
Not that you guys are nobody, and I can't hear your reactions right now, but...
I don't know. They might not be able to hear you, Paul.
No,
I don't know which microphone I'm on.
Yeah, so the gist is in NB format that you could save. I'll wait for some technical issues to work out. In NB format, pre IPython 1.0, you could save as a Python. You could save a notebook as a Python script in NB format. This is removed in IPython 3 and is obsolete in IPython 1 because NB convert is the way to convert notebooks to other formats like Python scripts and things. So it doesn't make any. It definitely makes no sense to use the NB format to save as Python. But we could theoretically trigger the NB convert call to convert the notebook to a script. There's no technical obstacle to that. It's just kind of an icky thing. I think it makes substantially more sense since running NB convert as a kind of post-save hook makes a certain amount of sense. I don't think there's a reason to limit that to only Python. So I think if we want...
Yes, but we haven't really worked out yet how NB convert can handle other languages.
Oh, and like NB convert to Julia or something, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, a generic NB convert to the native format of this language.
That actually brings up a good point. We should probably have NB convert, right? Because toPython only does one Python specific thing, and that's it assumes it's an IPython notebook, in which case it applies our input transformations to make it a valid Python script.
Mm-hmm.
And with the kernel information in the metadata, basically, if you just skip that step, then it's probably valid for most most languages.
Except you have to get the commenting right.
No, because we simply exclude all.
I mean, we put prompt numbers and things in some comments, I think.
Okay.
That's what
Yeah,
he means.
yeah,
But
yeah.
we
No,
could,
you'd have to leave that. You could only do code cell only stuff reliably.
yeah, but I think that's probably close enough.
Yeah, so
And
we
then
probably
we would have to, I guess, put the file extension in the kernel spec.
yeah, which seems a bit. Yeah, so that's a broader question of how do you provide NV convert to Python and maybe make that a to script in general.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those are kind of the two questions to me are make NV convert to script more generic than Python,
Mm-hmm.
and make save hooks more generic than to script.
Yes, though I think it may be worth leaving -- script as an alias for.
Yeah, and just show a warning every time it saves. Because I really think I do strongly think it should be removed. We can deprecate it in 3. I've felt it deprecated since 1, but obviously there's no mention of that, so that doesn't actually count.
I think possibly we should have a little bit more of a working out what is a good alternative then in terms of.
Yeah, and deprecating it in 3 will give us a better time frame for working out the better alternative.
Yeah. Okay.
So we want to write that down.
Into this commenty thing.
Yeah, no, I don't know what's up with that. All right.
Deprecate in the.
The unidirectional link of traitlets.
John is here. He put that on the thing.
John is here?
On the sign of him in hip chat. Jason Grout is listening in on YouTube, but that doesn't really work for two-way conversations, unfortunately, because of the lag.
Yeah, I mean this makes something more. It doesn't add any features, of course, because on trait change already has all of this.
I hadn't cottoned on to that one.
Because that's exactly what on trait change is a unidirectional side effect.
Mm-hmm. But if you do it with on trait change, then you have to write, a function saying apply this to this other thing.
Yeah, and so it's a question of whether we want shorthand for an on trait change that does just assign the value to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there's
I think the reason it's got into the development meeting agenda is because we don't know what to call it, rather than because we're not sure about the thing itself.
I'm not sure about the thing itself, but okay. That's fine.
Okay, well, it's up to you to.
No, if
jump
enough
into
people
the
agree, then I don't.
discussion.
That's fine. I don't. We don't need to have that conversation again. Hey, Jason.
Oh,
Hey, Jason. Can you hear us, Jason?
we heard an O from you, Jason.
Yeah.
Unless it was Damien.
Oh, God, I hate naming things.
Jason, we're not getting any sound from you, by the way. I don't know if you're talking or not. Okay, well, let's defer that one until there's
Yep.
someone who can actually talk about it. Fav icons, how smart should they be? Someone opened a pull request which just, I think, made a different fav icon for the dashboard pages as opposed to the notebook pages. And then people started talking about having fav icons that showed like the kernel type and the kernel busy idle status and all sorts of things. My take is that I like fav icons being very, pretty static, simple things, so that I can see at a glance which tabs of what I have open are notebooks.
Yeah. Yeah. Given how bad browsers are at dynamic favicons,
Mm-hmm.
I would be. Right, I've used a few websites that put like notification counts and things, and they do a remarkably bad job at being correct.
I think I said as much in that PR.
Yeah.
Yes.
Given that Google can't do it right for Gmail and their own browser, I would have very little faith in our own ability to do it right for.
So you're saying that we should make our own browser min and then only support that?
I'm just saying that what should be the easiest, the most, the people with the most expertise in getting a dynamic favicon to work don't seem to be able to do it reliably. That I think the chances of us doing it reliably are basically zero.
Yeah.
So I'd rather not spend time dealing with bug reports about the favicon says something that's not accurate.
Yeah, I mean that's the critical part is dealing with.
Because the
bug
value
reports.
of it is also very, very small.
I think that different fav icons for notebooks versus dashboards is useful. I could go either way on that one.
So we set favicon in the kernel spec? Or is it just one? Or is
No,
it
I mean
two?
for
So just when you're looking at a folder versus when you're looking at the dashboard versus when you're looking at a notebook. But I think it's the same reliability problem. I think fav icons originally were meant to be per domain.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way that a lot of the bugs in the browsers are sort of related to that. It's not expecting that you'll have a different fav icon depending on what the URL path is. Although you can specify the fav icon in the header in the head portion.
Yeah, with the link rel.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's what we do.
Right.
I had a vague feeling that it's reasonably okay for different fav icons on different pages now, but it's the changing the fav icon on one page that causes problems. but yeah, I haven't experimented with this a lot, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my inclination. Hmm.
The other argument, I guess, is I don't know of any site that does different favicons for different pages. I mean, GitHub has the same favicon whether you're looking at a folder, a file, an issue, anything.
Yeah.
Stack Overflow similarly, it's the same whether it's a list or an individual question.
Yeah, I think making the icon thing a block is reasonable, so it's easy to override. But I wouldn't change the behavior. Yeah, I would be inclined to allow favicon to be a block and then not actually change it for. I would prefer it to not be different for the dashboard and the notebook.
I don't see enough benefit for the cost to maintain and work on that, but I think it's very subjective matter at the end.
Well, I mean, I guess the argument is if we're making it a block anyway, then the cost of overriding that block for one type of page is pretty minimal.
Okay.
But yeah, I could go either way on this, and I think the overall feeling is leaning towards no, we don't want to have different favicons. Okay, add class and remove class methods. So this was a PR which got there were public add class and remove class methods, and they got turned into private methods with the public version deprecated and saying please use the private version. And I'm not quite sure what this was supposed to achieve, because to my mind, a deprecation thing should never point to a private method that suggests that something is wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but
if you're pointing to a private method, that means you're not actually deprecating it at all.
Yeah.
So that.
And I tried to push John on what people should really do instead, and there didn't seem to be any clear answer. I think the reason that these methods are being... The reason that we don't want people to use these methods is because the order in which you add classes is not... it makes a difference in CSS whether you add class A and then class B, or class B and then class A, and that makes it somewhat confusing that these methods won't always do the same thing regardless of whether you call them.
Yeah, but classes are an ordered list, or it's a string space delimited string, depending on how you think about it. So and add class, a function interface for adding classes, which we have and jQuery also has, is just appending to that list.
Mm-hmm.
So we could, and I think maybe John was looking at this with the sync dict stuff. that if you just synced those attributes, there wouldn't be a problem. It's the fact that we have this weird proxy stuff for adding to a list that doesn't exist yet.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think
so the deprecating and pointing to private methods is definitely wrong.
Yeah, I think we should leave this until John is here to discuss it with, because I mean, I think we're going to sit around and say, yes, this definitely isn't right, but without
that's all we can do with
work out what is the right thing to do with it.
Yeah, that's all we can do without John, is to say this is definitely not right.
The Trello item says we all agree make add class and remove class much less exposed. That's what this is a reference to. So it's pretty vague.
Uh-huh.
So putting an underscore in front of it makes it much less exposed.
We just shelter it a bit.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I don't understand.
Okay, adding text inputs to slider widgets. The idea being that beside a slider, you have a little box. I think there is already a display of the value of the slider. The idea is that would just be, an editable text field. It's already possible to make a slider widget and a text widget and link them together. But the author wants something simpler and more convenient. Oh, hey, John. No sound at the moment, John. There's some... Matthias reckons it should be in an external library. What else has been said? Brian says he's 50-50. Sylvain said you could have a key of the widget content editable. Oh, no, I think someone suggested that you could just put a content editable attribute on the label. That seems more complicated to me. Anybody have anything that they want to throw in there? I've dumped a load of PRs onto the agenda because they seem to be sitting there. Someone said this isn't quite right, and it's not quite clear what we should either give the author something to move forward with or close them.
Yeah, so Jason in HipChat expressed a strong support for having the text area be editable.
Uh-huh. And says that a content editable attribute is a really natural way to do it.
So you mean Jason, you mean a content editable attribute on the widget class?
I think he means like HTML attribute content editable. But well, I mean that's what I'm thinking about. But I don't know what Jason is. We'll get a reply in a minute or two.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, and I mean there may be some stuff that can be reused better, but I think this makes sense.
Okay, So the text box thing.
Range.
Okay, so
Range
we're
widgets.
leaning towards yes. So then we should do the review and working out the details. John has just gone to restart his computer, so hopefully he'll be back in a minute and able to discuss the add class and remove class things. In the meantime, more widget related fun. Range widgets. So this is a slider with two slidery things so that you can set an upper and a lower bound on something, and two separate people came and implemented this independently, and one of them did it with a single thing, which is a tuple, and the other did it with dual integers, separate upper and lower attributes. And there are advantages to both APIs, and I think the way that the discussion is going is that it should be based on the tuple, because that, like, setting and retrieving the value of a single thing works better with our framework, but then there should be convenience attributes for accessing the properties that can access the individual upper and lower.
Yeah, I think a synced tuple trait, and then properties for higher and lower.
Okay.
Either that or the other way around. I don't think it actually makes much of a difference.
I think that's what I put in the review comment, or in a review comment on one of the PRs. Which one are you looking at?
We're looking at both of them.
Yeah.
We're just discussing the idea. Oh yeah, the disadvantage of a property is that you can't use properties in link.
So what if the tuple were the property? Because you're more likely to want to link to the individual values.
Yes.
Because it shouldn't matter whether we're syncing the tuple or the two numbers separately, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of them can be a property and one of them something else. I mean, you can implement properties with traitlets. It's just properties are better, right? It's perfectly easy for to do the property mechanic with traitlets, but I would make, or the first thing that comes to my mind is sync the two bounds and then make the tuple a property that gets and sets two values separately. Because if people really want to link to both numbers, they can link to both numbers separately.
Mm-hmm. But linking to the tuple has less utility.
Yeah, I don't know why you would want to do that.
Okay.
And you can always get the equivalent behavior with two links, which is not exactly a massive burden.
Mm-hmm.
So 1696, I think, is the one that implements the separate. Just looking at it. Yes, 1696 has the separate upper and lower traitlets, and 6050 has the combined tuple, and I haven't reviewed the code. John, have you looked at this? Do you know, like, is one of them clearly closer to being ready than the other? I'm wondering which one should we try and push forward with, and which one should we close?
The author of the second one said that I don't see the numbers, but Chronitis, his PR, I think, is a little bit more complete. It has tests and everything.
Okay, that's 6050. That's the older one of the two.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they're failing.
So we think that
So close 6096,
Yeah, I think so.
and then finish it up in.
I think so.
okay. So John, now that you're here, we're going to loop back to the add class and remove class methods.
Okay.
So we have a general kind of feeling that deprecating public methods and pointing to private methods is
Bad idea.
not the right thing to do, but we're not quite sure what the right thing to do is in this case.
Yeah.
Do
Do you guys
we
understand
found
why we're trying to deprecate that?
We found a Trello item which said, "We all agree these should be made less obvious," or something like that.
Yeah, that was from the SciPy little breakout room session that we had. Well, I guess really there is two big reasons for it. The most important is that it's just kind of broken add remove class, right? Because it's order dependent. It makes for all kinds of weird questions. You know, why doesn't this work? Why when I redisplay this it looks different? Why is my widget not behaving statefully? But it just doesn't work with state, right? It's a stateless thing. So that's one of the big reasons to not expose that.
Yeah, but CSS classes are not a stateless thing, right?
They aren't. But using
It's a totally stateful ordered list.
Yeah, the way that it's implemented, it is a stateless thing because of the selector, just because of the ability to set add and remove classes based on the selector. Right. That's what makes it stateless.
But it isn't, because it's. I mean, the class list is just a single string that you can get.
Yes. Yes, but you can add classes to a set of things, and then add classes using a selector that selects based on those classes that you added. And
we have a Python API for adding classes to arbitrary other things with some other class.
Yeah. That's just exposing selectors blindly does that. It allows you to do that.
Jesus.
So and there's I have an example. In fact, I think in the widget tutorial that I gave at SciPy, I showed an example. So it's in that content, and you can see why it's not stateful the way it is now.
Yeah, no, I remember why it's not stateful now.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure why it's not stateful in general, because it isn't. It is stateful in general.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. So I mean, I don't know. Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know how to do that with the selectors. I don't know. Like, I mean, we could just get rid of the ability to specify a selector, or only specify a select set of selectors, maybe.
Right, because when we call add class and remove class, we're calling them on, let's see, on widget objects, which is the scope of calling add class and remove class on a widget object is much smaller than calling it on arbitrary selectors. So and in the tutorial materials, I see add class and remove class on widget objects. I don't see any arbitrary jQuery add class on this selector call.
You don't see the section with it has like the grid with multiple colors, and it does the same add and remove class calls in some different orders, and it produces different results.
Where's this example, sorry?
It's in the SciPy material, and that's in Brian's docs branch. So he has a docs PR where he's updating the documents. It's in there. It's also available in the IPython index repository.
Okay, let's try that.
That's probably the easiest way to get to it. And it should be under, I think it's widget styling, or styling your widgets, something like that.
Yeah, widget styling.
Widget styling, I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a good solution if we could make it stateful. Then that would probably be good. Somebody took a crack at making it stateful before, but it kept like an order n list because of the problem outlined. And
I see what you mean.
And I think the other idea too is that we kind of want to abstract the browserisms a little bit more if possible, but that's not as important because it is a DOM widget, so inherently is browserism.
Yeah, and what would be the cost of removing, like adding classes and things to the widget? Makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah, I think the biggest cost is the bootstrap classes. Like, I've seen a lot of people applying alert and info to make blue and green buttons and things like that. Like that's a very common use.
I'm just wondering what would be the cost of removing the support for the selectors. So you can add and remove class on the widgets, but you can't add and remove class on arbitrary elements inside the widget.
Well, we just changed it so the default selector is the top level selector, which is an element that contains both the label to the left of the widget and the widget itself. So under that design, you wouldn't be able to do any of the bootstrap classes at all because they wouldn't apply to the actual thing that you're interested in. I guess we could make an exception.
I think doing CSS from Python is just...
It's ridiculous.
Is not something we should support.
Well, here's an idea.
Beyond the absolute basic, being able to expose these kind of arbitrary jQuery calls, I think, is just...
Yeah, and so that's why that's why we're deprecating it. But we want it to leave.
But I would say deprecate, right? Because the problem is right now you're deprecating it and then saying please use a private method.
Yeah.
I would say deprecate it, and then if we want to deprecate it, and don't tell them about the private method.
Okay. Yeah. And but yeah, we want to leave the private method just as an escape hatch, just in case somebody who really knows what they're doing needs to use it. Maybe that's not a good idea. I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure it is. I don't know. I think if you want to do elaborate CSS for things other than like the topmost element, you should. Right, because you can always, by adding one class to the top level element, you can do an incredible amount of styling of inner elements just by adding CSS to the page.
Yeah.
Rather than executing jQuery calls.
Yeah.
And that behaves a lot more sensibly.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So just get rid of. So I could deprecate it and get rid of the selector notion, and then we could have it could be stateful. It could just be a string, right? I mean, it could just be a string trait, and that would apply to the topmost thing. And then if you wanted to style individual things, like you said, you could push CSS to the page.
Yeah.
I like that idea. I think that's a really good idea.
I mean, doing those things with pure CSS can be elaborate and complicated, but at least you don't have to maintain the kind of weird stateless state.
Yeah, no, and it's I mean it's just a problem. Like I said, people run into trouble with it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll add that to the hack pad.
Thank you, Brian. I'll be back in a sec.
Okay, let's have a brief break while Fernando and Brian get audio sorted out and things.
I'm here. I'm fine. I'm just as you guys were talking about. I've been here for a while. I've just been listening.
Yes, we can just about barely hear you, Fernando. You're really, really quiet.
Is that better?
Yes.
That's better. Oh, okay. No, I've been here. It's just that since you guys have been kind of deeply into the widget discussion, I didn't want to interrupt.
Okay. Yes, I thought you might be having trouble with your audio.
Oh no. I was just listening.
Okay, we'll just let Brian and Min get back.
And where is the second? Can somebody
Hi, guys.
and
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian. Link? Can somebody read it in the chat room, please? I always land on the one for some reason. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I think we're now at Interact on Demand, which is where my little cursor is down here.
Got it.
So someone wants to have an option for. I'm getting a strange echo from someone. Someone wants to have an option so that when you have an interact call, you can set some option, and instead of updating every time you move a slider or change text box or something, you have to actually push a button to say, go and do this again, which is obviously useful for long-running things. But it's kind of interact could grow options pretty much ad infinitum. And do we want to?
Yes.
Fernando, you're muted. You're muted, Fernando. You're muted, Fernando. I see your lips moving, but you're muted.
Thank you. I was muted. Sorry. So I have a couple of thoughts on this. One is that I don't think this keyword arg is a very good idea. At least not in this way. I would think rather of including support for sort of if people want to have a manual control, they can build a widget that has a run button, like the graph factorization, the integer factorization example is a good one. that shows. Now, maybe the APIs to do that can be made easier, but because that example was one that John and Brian built by hand, and was custom written code, and we may consider making that easier. But that seems to me like a better approach, which is if you're building effectively a custom user interface that requires that you have an explicit execution button, then you should build that, because I'm a little skeptical that that starting to automatically add buttons in random places is going to work very well.
But I mean,
go ahead.
The only issue I see is that there are vast number of usage cases where interact is completely useless, and being able to add a button to trigger that action explicitly completely solves all of those problems. I mean, if you have a computation that takes 5 minutes,
you shouldn't interact with it.
No, I mean, it's non-trivial to write the code that takes the input from all of those widgets, that has the widget shortcuts, and that runs the code on when a button is clicked, and that does the right thing with matplotlib. It's very non-trivial to do that, and it's completely consistent with interact. I mean, it is interact. It's just a slightly different way of triggering execution.
So I think we agree that it would be useful for a wrapper to exist that makes this kind of thing easy to do. Kind of the two questions that we need to work out are: one, should it be part of IPython or part of some third-party widget toolkit? Because we already said there was a pull request some time ago which would try to pass the names of your variables and do nicer turning underscores into spaces and capitalization and things to make the names look more palatable. And we said, it's a reasonable idea, but not in core IPython. Let's push it out to a third-party library. And the other thing is, if we do want it, or even to some extent if we don't, what should the API look like? Should this be a keyword argument, or a different function, or something that you call on it?
Yeah. No, I think the API question is a really good question, and it may be that is different enough that a different function is in order. I honestly almost consider this a bug with interact. I mean, it borders on that.
Right, Brian. I do agree that it's almost a bug with interact, and Paul and I were looking at this for the last couple of days with Ariel, writing some brain visualization stuff. In that probably, and I saw you already made, both you and Matthias at least I saw made those in comments there, that one thing that probably would alleviate a huge amount of these problems, not all of them, if you need to set multiple parameters, is having a flag that makes it very easy to say trigger, basically have the event fire only on release rather than at every event change, because that is one that is actually a very, very common one, right? Where you just want, instead of sending all events, you only want the final event to be sent.
On things like sliders.
Yeah, with things like sliders.
Just a small interjection. We set the default throttling value to 3 arbitrarily. Should we try setting the default throttling value to 1?
That's maybe an experiment worth trying and seeing.
Yeah, we should play with it.
It might just help enough that it would cover a lot of things.
You're still going to get, when you move a slider, you're still going to get 2 events rather than 1, which the on release that you want, but it should at least make it.
It works for a calculation that takes 5 seconds. For something that takes 5 minutes, it's a pain.
Yeah, but 5 minute interacting with something that takes 5 minutes is still kind of silly. I think beyond 30 seconds is pretty silly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that we honestly, I'm almost thinking that we should have caching, sort of memoization of the function calls be on by default, because I suspect that the vast majority of use cases are cases where when you drag a slider back over the same values, you expect the same answer. I mean, yes, you could have built a widget that is reading data from a live source or something where actually you want to keep calling it de novo every single time because it's reading from hardware or something. But in the vast majority of cases, that's not the case. And so
Memorize on the client side?
Having memoization, now, doing it correctly, I don't think is completely
Because
trivial.
we haven't done. I mean, other than the outer product thing that John wrote, we have no such thing currently.
I know, and that's why.
So there's a question of whether you do it client side would save the most. Yeah, that could be tricky, but we can. I mean, that it is doing exactly that logic is the static widgets. So we can.
Exactly.
I would do static widgets first, and then see how we can apply that.
Leverage. That's why I don't want to rush into it.
Yeah, perfect.
I agree that we probably want to do it, tackle the whole problem together. But I think in the long run, we really want to get there.
So,
I really agree with
Jason
the
said
comment, Jason.
What's that?
There's a long history of scientific research projects spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to make web forums that basically allow people to pick the values for various parts of a computation and then press a button to make it go. And I mean, it's ridiculous, but I think that's...
Yeah, no, but I think... Yeah, it depends on this on-demand sort of, how we define this on-demand sort of thing. Whether it's a different behavior for interact or whether it's a different thing whose API is very similar.
Yeah, and
I think the build some widgets and click go is a reasonable thing for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But I think I think even any heuristic for when that should go, if an individual computation takes a minute or more, it shouldn't implicitly execute ever.
I'm not quite sure what you're saying. Are you saying
so
that?
In my mind, I'm thinking of interact as you move the sliders and it updates.
Yep.
However efficiently we make that happen.
Yep.
And I'm thinking of this on-demand move sliders and click go as another thing.
Yep.
And and in my mind, the on-demand widget click go thing is reasonable for 1 minute, 5 minutes, whatever. And the interact implicit execution based on some heuristic should never be used for something that takes it significantly more than 30 seconds.
Yep. No, I think that
and whether that's on demand as an arg to interact or if it's a different function that looks almost identical, that's that's
API design.
Yeah, but I think of those two things as very separate.
Yes, I've also commented saying that, to my mind, interact means specifically, we are making this function interactive.
Yeah.
As
soon as you move the thing, the values update.
Yeah, to me, clicking that's. I mean, it's sort of to me that's not interactive scale.
Absolutely no, and I think the more we talk about it, the more I think it really is something that's different than interact. I think it's important, but I think it should be a separate function, and that we should leave interact alone in this respect. We should obviously improve the caching and the
it points to making some of the widget shortcut composition to be reusable.
Absolutely. No, having those be more public.
You might build a variety of similar things with the same pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think that's a great idea.
And so the other important question is, does this belong in IPython or in a third-party thing? Matthias has a comment saying that he's strongly in favour of pushing this to an external library. I'm 50-50.
I think it's a common enough usage case, and it's close enough to being an actual bug with Interact. I think we should give people a good way of doing this in IPython. I think I'm probably 90-10 on that question. And it's simple. I mean, we already have, I mean, it's not much additional code. And it will force us to clean up the widget abbreviation stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always good to have the n equals 2 case.
Yeah.
Okay, that seems to have come to a conclusion. I'm going to just loop back on the agenda and go to a couple of things that we were waiting for more people to come in.
So actually, one more question. So on that particular pull request, are we going to recommend closing the pull request, but telling the person that we would like to have a separate API for a separate function and refactor the abbreviation stuff?
I haven't looked enough at the code to know how much it would take to change it into.
I mean, it's not hard work. It's very simple.
So I think we can leave a comment and let the PR be open until they decide whether they want to do it that way or not.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
So looping back to leftover topics, the first one is there is a PyCon 2015 call for proposals before September the 15th.
Wow.
That's serious advanced planning. Do we want to do any
one is PyCon. What are the dates of PyCon?
April 8th to 16th.
Sheesh.
So I know I cannot go to PyCon. So
I'm pretty sure I can go to that because I don't plan anything that far in advance.
Well, that's the one quarter I'm teaching this coming year, so it's an unusual thing that I know.
There's a bit of an issue with our clarity with what our financial resources are going to be exactly at that time. That right now that's going to be early in the transition to a new funding cycle, and I'm slightly. Everything should be okay, but I'm slightly hesitant to commit to a bunch of travel without sort of the money in the bank, because it's international travel. It's going to be expensive. So I saw the call for proposals go out, and I was like, I'm a little shy right now of making a commitment to that immediately. When is the deadline?
September the 15th.
Okay, that doesn't give us a huge amount of time. Let me look at the numbers a little bit more, and let me think about it a little bit more for over the next couple of weeks, and we'll revisit this one. I don't want to make a commitment to actually having to spend money we don't have.
But Fernando, as I recall, your experience after PyCon this year is that it is a conference that we really should have a presence at. Am I remembering that correctly?
I mean, I think it was valuable. We've gone 3 times in a row. I don't know that we absolutely kind of should go, but I think there's some value in going. I don't think we all need to go. That's another option, is only 1 or 2 people go. I've gone for the last 3. I don't feel like I absolutely have to go again next year. I think Thomas is Thomas, are you interested in going?
Yeah.
So, and Thomas has been doing some work on the Python 3 stuff, and there's going to be a lot of discussions there, probably around Python 3.5 at the conference, so that could be valuable. So maybe having one person go, but yeah, I'm just uncomfortable committing to spending money we don't have. Let's just put it that way.
That seems reasonable. And I mean, we'll still, I think, get a lot out of it if we go without a talk. So,
Oh, and we can also, I think the time scale for signing up for open source booths is much later. And honestly, that's probably, in terms of feet on the ground, getting to talk to people, that's extremely beneficial and rewarding.
Yeah, so though it's worth keeping in mind that if we do that, the people who go pretty much have to assume that they're not going to see the conference, right? And so that's an important point to keep in mind. When we did the open source booth, we basically didn't see the conference.
No,
because when you do that, you're pretty much on the hook for being at that table pretty much all the time. The traffic, PyCon is a busy conference. The traffic does not stop at that booth. But you're right. That has a lot of visibility, and it's a great way to really reach out to people, to meet with people, to talk and engage with a lot of folks. So it's. Go ahead.
There is another reason why I think this, even though I can't go, why I think this PyCon would be particularly important, and that is to make sure our rebranding as Jupyter makes it into that community as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be useful to be there and sort of.
Not if I wouldn't be concerned, but with the lovely trick that the UCOP system played on our grant recently, I'm just a little shy right now. That's all.
Oh no, I understand.
Do they have lightning talks at PyCon?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because that would be quite a good way, again, to get the message out about our rebranding, because it's the fact that we are rebranding can be conveyed in a fairly short period of time, and a lightning talk will be seen by quite a lot of people.
Yeah, that would be great.
And the lightning talk has already been written, so
and you don't need to sign up for the months in advance.
You don't even need to be there. Just book a slot and then just play the YouTube video of the SciPy talk, right?
Play the video, exactly. So no, but I mean, there is a lot of value in going. Let's just figure out the logistics over the next few weeks,
sure.
and we'll see if we can make it happen.
Well, and maybe maybe we just don't submit a talk, and so we let the September deadline pass.
Yeah.
And then we can always go and give a lightning talk or do a booth later if we want.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, the other thing that we put on the pile to loop back to was the Unilink sync, replicate, etc. things. So we have already for traitlets an object which will keep true traitlets in sync, so when either of them is updated, it will apply the same update to the other one. Somebody wants to have a one-way version of the same thing, and Min has a question about whether that's necessary at all, but I think the main reason it's on the agenda is because we can't work out what to call it. And one option is that we could rename, so the existing thing that's two-way is called link, and if we renamed that to something like sync, then link would make sense for the one-way thing, but making link one-way retrospectively in a very public part of the API is...
Can we call it Unicode right arrow?
No, that's what I'm thinking. Arrow.
Well, no, what about follow?
Follow, yeah, that was another one that was proposed.
Because the idea is sort of that this one follows that other one, right? Basically it's a graph relationship, and it's going from an undirected graph edge.
Yeah, I actually think Unilink
directed edge.
Oops, sorry.
What's that?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You dropped off audio.
Standard terminology for directed graphs is things like parent or child, but follow is another one that is commonly used if this follows, if one depends on another. So
I'm fine with follow, but I'm also fine with the existing Unilink that's in the PR.
See, I don't much like Unilink. That doesn't. The uni in that doesn't say unidirectional to me. It says there's only one of these links.
Yeah.
Okay.
University link. Where it looks a lot like unlink.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing. Unilink looks very like unlink.
It's the university bus system.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Jason has
But
proposals of
I mean, and
follow.
the other reason why. What's that?
Jason has proposals of follow,
Say that,
propagate. Jason has proposals of follow, propagate, broadcast, push.
Watch is another one.
Okay. Push more than. So it's more of a pop-sub kind of model.
Well, there's kind of different ways to think about the same thing. Subscribe is one that I could live with. Broadcast to me doesn't quite. Broadcast suggests like, send this event out to multiple things, whereas what this is actually achieving is more like the subscribe stage.
Yeah, basically, broadcast already exists, and that's the state change event. And subscribe would be hooking up another subscriber to that broadcast event that is already happening. Subscribe I'm okay with it.
Is there a way? I don't know what I want to ask here. I like the word follow, but I think with the existing API, follow is the opposite action. It's the inverse action. So the way that Unilink works currently is it's a list of tuples. The first tuple is the source attribute and object. The remaining tuples are the target.
Mm-hmm.
And so the word follow there is a little backwards.
Yeah, I see that. I was trying to think of. I was precisely looking for a word that would where the spelling would convey kind of easily and clearly what is actually happening. And so that reversal obviously makes follow not that good. I hadn't looked at the API. And I think that's the point that Jason is bringing up on HipChat.
It's like
is
fan.
that same
It's
one.
not follow. It's fan, right?
And there is also the clear but long unidirectional link. I mean, it could just be called that.
I don't think you need unidirect. I think directional link is.
Yes, that's slightly better.
It has a direction. It has.
Yeah.
There's one.
Yeah, you talk about a directed graph, meaning the links are unidirectional.
So, but the API would remain the same. It would be, it's what Jason put on HipChat, follow A, comma, B, C, D, meaning that A pushes into B, C, and D, right?
Yeah, I think that's the...
We do agree on that API.
Make B, C, and D follow A.
Although in the current API, the arguments B, C, and D are at the top level, not in a sublist.
Oh, okay. But basically it's follow star arg, where the first pushes to n minus 1, whatever n is, one or more of them.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
It's like you feed A into B, C, and D.
Yeah.
Yeah, tricky to think of a good name for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think directional link is while it's long, is very clear. And also,
if you like directional link and don't like long things, how bad is
propagate was
alias
coming
of
to mind
B
as well,
link
Jason.
well,
for directional link?
do we want to keep these nouns? Or, well, is link a noun or a verb in our current API?
Well, it's a class that acts like a function, so it's both. And
Okay.
Yeah, should that be directional link or directionally link?
How about D-Link? D-Link?
D-Link.
They're like a little white router.
Link.
Actually, I'm fine.
It's the sound that Russian ice cubes make.
Okay.
So no consensus.
Exactly.
Propagate. I don't mind
Yeah, I think since we already have link, I think directional link, or if you want to abbreviate direction, some fraction of the word direction, such as D or dir or whatever, is clear. It makes the relationship between the two things clear.
Yeah, I agree.
Unfortunately, dir is commonly used for directory.
Right.
Yeah, so dir is probably not great, but yeah.
You have to have quite a lot of word
No,
to it.
So
I like D-Link, actually.
yeah, I was thinking D-Link. I mean, honestly,
And if you do
look,
D-Link,
at the end of the day, every API is a bit of jargon, and people learn the jargon. So you just don't want to make the jargon so backwards that it's out.
Maybe.
Right.
And if you do def directional link, D-Link equals directional link, then under name will be directional link, and
Yeah, that's what I was about to suggest. Maybe we should have it with the long name and then have an alias for the short name.
Jason, I think at this point everything we've put out is public. So yeah.
No, that doesn't mean we can't.
No, I was
change things,
answering
but-
the same thing you answered, Brian.
Yeah.
I was just late, didn't type it.
yeah.
So
Okay.
I
Go with that.
like that. Great.
Problem solved. Victory.
So can we?
Is someone commenting? Do you want me to comment?
So I would do no underscore D-Link. That's my initial thought.
No underscore in directional link either.
No, I would put an underscore there, but not in the shorter version. Yeah, like that. So did we conclude that we are going to put -- script back?
Yes, for 3,
Okay.
and then
Yeah,
it will be
it will call
deprecated
NB
in 3. Yeah.
Okay.
So I will put it back after. It will be gone. It will keep it gone until NB format 4 is merged.
Okay, and then you'll put it back.
I'll put it back as a part of the NB format 4 PR.
Yeah. I don't think that's a great choice, but I'm fine with it. I don't feel very strongly about it.
And with a deprecation warning. So you'll still get a warning, but it'll be an actual deprecation warning, not a "this is gone now" warning.
Right. Okay.
It will be a warning
will
and
be
it
gone.
still works, rather than a warning. The thing you've asked me to do, I'm just not going to do.
Yeah, warning. This is an error.
Well, it's so the reason for the warning.
I'm not,
Go ahead.
no, I'm not particularly crazy about the solution either. But the fact that it's adopted is a signal that having a way of expressing that idea of, as I'm working, keep a copy of the code in plain text sitting next to it is something that people are obviously using, and there's kind of a need for it. So
yeah,
I think the one thing that I think we can do is, and I think that's the lesson from this, is people will begin using things. So that's one area where I do like kind of the Linux kernel attitude, which was sort of you don't gratuitously break user space. And so when we deprecate it and we actually remove it, we need to provide an equally easy alternative. It may be called something else. It may, under the hood, do something different. But we shouldn't just tell people, oh, just don't do that. And there's this other crazy convoluted way to do it, because that's kind of the perfect example of that in my mind of how exactly not to do that is the Python subprocess library, which is sort of, oh, you shouldn't use all these 4 libraries that have very easy ways to do things. Here's how you do it with this new great way, which is 10 times harder, right? And,
Yep.
and that's not how we should do things. So we do need. This is a
Yeah.
problem that people need
And
solved.
we should be
And,
careful
and-
about adding things like this, because I strongly
yeah,
regret
I mean,
adding this
the
in the
lesson
first
is-
place. I think that was a huge mistake.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Whatever we
Yeah.
put out, people will start using.
Yeah.
No, this is
At the same time, we have to try things out and we experiment
Yeah.
with things.
Yeah, but if we have to commit to supporting our experiments forever, that is a strong disincentive to commit to actually do the experiment.
Yeah, no, I think.
I mean, that's actually one lesson. One lesson there is that if we ever, especially because command line flags end up getting put into scripts and people's aliases and whatnot, there's changing them is so disruptive that one thing we might want to do is if we ever think of an idea again like this where we're not totally sure but we want to give it a try, maybe we have a naming convention where something like anything that's an experimental command line flag, we begin with a capital X or something where we sort of flag out explicitly these are command line flags and things we're trying to see if they work. Don't rely on them in any way, and at least we've given you a fair warning. They're meant for feedback and experimentation.
I think that's only useful if that frees us from the future requirement of deprecating them upon removal.
Well, no, but that would be kind of the contract.
Yeah, if
right?
we called this X script and we were allowed to just remove it and without any deprecation process, that's the only way in which that's actually useful, I think.
I think the counter-argument is that this is precisely what web browsers do with vendor-specific prefixes, and it doesn't really free them from any of the things because people just rely on them anyway, because people want to do things before they've been officially standardized. Surprise, surprise.
Well, and my next suggestion for Nado would then be, let's add -X to all of our command line arguments.
Awesome.
Yes, we're renaming
You don't want
to IPython.
You don't want to be bound by any compatibility requirements ever, Brian. Is what you're saying. Sort of, you want every single line of code that we've ever written to be fair game for complete kind of arbitrary changing at any point in time.
No, not quite that. I don't. I think Thomas is right that basically people just instantly adapt to that naming convention and keep using it just like they would all along, and that they'll still get angry if you deprecate something.
Yeah, no, it's probably true. I mean, yeah, the reality is that the moment things begin working out, there's somebody somewhere picks it up. XKCD has a great comic about that, the Emacs thermal bug thing. That is really funny. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's just no escaping it. So it's the reality of this thing having this crazy thing called users, right?
Well, but it also speaks to the fact that what we can do is just do more things that are really experimental outside of the tree, right? I mean, the Linux kernel is an example of this, where people maintain patches of like, oh, this is the new memory manager, and so if you want to use it, you can. It's over here, but you're going to have to commit to doing it, and you understand when you do that you're sort of that patch set can disappear on you at any point down the line.
Absolutely. Yep. You're absolutely correct. Yeah, we really need at this point. Basically, we have to assume that whatever we drop into the main tree, we're stuck with. So we have to be way more careful. And to be fair, this was early in the beginning of the notebook server machinery when we were just trying to figure out how to
ND-convert was a thing. Remember, it's when we
I mean, as much as it's biting us now, I actually don't regret having done it, because I do think that it solved the problem for a long time that was needed. It's just that now we have to drag it with us.
Okay. I will point out it is after 11:30.
Yes. Do we want to? We've got through a fair bit of the agenda. We got down to where my little person marker is now. Do we want to keep on plowing through? Brian has quite a bit on the agenda that we haven't got to.
And
do we want to
push back from last week and from previous weeks? So, Brian, are any of those things stuff that we should talk about this week?
Or I also suggested on HipChat at some point
week.
that we have a supplementary dev meeting to try and catch up with the backlog.
I vote for finishing now because
Yeah, I will definitely not be
I
at
have
the
to go.
deadline next week.
All right, well, on we go then.
Push
Oh
on
no.
through to the other side.
And I'm completely open to keep going. So I'm.
Okay, let's keep going. Let's try to make it 30 minutes.
Okay.
So
Well,
58,
then
44.
I will leave now then.
Yes. And enjoy your vacation. We don't see you next week, right?
No, I'll be back next week. I come back on Tuesday.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, have a great trip. Have fun,
Yeah.
and we'll see you next week.
Bye, man.
See you. Have a good
Bye.
weekend.
What's that on your hand?
Yeah.
Bye.
Check it out.
See
All right. See you guys.
you.
Yeah. All right.
Are the HackPad comments? Is that
right.
comment API new?
Say what, Brian?
Is
I
that
don't
HackPad comment API new?
I don't think it's new. I think it's been there. Most of us don't use it, but Matthias does for some reason.
I actually really like it. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
I think it's unnecessary clutter,
how do
but
you put comments?
There's a comment bubble up at the top and right to the left of the checkbox.
or it says // at
I
the
see
beginning
it.
of a line will achieve the same thing.
I see. Okay. Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Because I think it's nice because it's a way of distinguishing, capturing what is sort of facts and what are opinions.
Yeah, no, I like it. I really do. So it distinguishes between us sort of commenting and the sort of the conclusion, the decision we've made.
Yeah.
Okay, so an option to shut down the kernels when the notebook page is closed, / possibly when kernels have been inactive for some amount of time. Before we go into this argument again, everybody has looked at it and agreed this is definitely not going to be turned on by default, so we do not have to discuss that. Do we want to... There are some people who want to run public web services. I think the PR was open, or the issue was opened by Jeroen Ooms, who's a R developer and runs some kind of cloud site where you can have snippets of code which you run in the cloud, and obviously in that context. You don't want every notebook anyone's started to be left running forever. You want to have them automatically closing down, and it's not a big issue that you're losing variables, because that's kind of what people expect if you go to a website and then just close it and come back a week later. So
my thought on this is that we should provide a way for people to implement this policy, and it may be that we need to emit a little bit of signaling so that but that the actual implementation and policy, especially because the issue here is an issue of policy.
Yeah,
and implementing a framework for policy is complicated. So I think we should give people the data so that they can create the policy they want and implement it, but not try to implement the policy. Because you can imagine one website which is going to basically say, I want to kill on disconnect, and that's it. But as Brian said in the comments, disconnects can happen for a number of reasons, and you could be destroying user data. And another website is going to say, I want to detect when the last action was taken, and then I want to give people an hour, and after an hour of silence, I want to kill it. The amount of potential policies that you can imagine is huge. And so I think what we should do is provide a mechanism that says, if you listen to this, either you monitor this log file or you listen to this socket or whatever, you will know when certain things happened. And then go crazy. Go implement whatever you want. But people do it on the outside. That's kind of my take on this. So maybe, for example, whenever certain events happen, we can broadcast them on a port. Maybe the server can have a pub socket. What's that?
That already exists. It's just the kernel status events published on IOPub. Anyone can connect to that socket, monitor.
Well, the kernel status, the only thing it doesn't do is how long it's been idle for. That's the.
Well,
That's it.
But idle, the idle message means that it has been idle for 0 time, like it's just starting to be idle.
Yes, you would have to run something which is always listening to that, and like every time it receives an idle message, it starts a timer.
Yeah, no, I mean,
But
that's
in
But one question, for example, though, is that only represents kernel messages. Do we want the notebook server to also emit, basically broadcast when certain events happen, broadcast them on a certain port? Is that something that, because I think that is a fair question to ask of us. What I don't think is something we should try to deal with is the implementation of all these policies and whatnot, because I think there's just so much variability there that we should just let people like run their own little monitor services that do whatever. We just want to be able to provide the data in a simple a form and as easy to use a form as possible. And so the kernels provide certain events. Do we want the server to provide any of those events?
But the problem is it providing those events over HTTP or WebSockets, or like a backend 0MQ socket, or like I don't.
I would imagine that this would all be done over 0MQ because it would be something local. Like I mean, I'm brainstorming here. Believe me, I'm not proposing anything very concrete. But I'm imagining, for example, should the server rebroadcast certain events from all of its kernels, and in addition, whenever certain things happen that are server side, that are from clients like connections and disconnections, it also broadcasts. And there's a single port that every server has where you can connect a listener and listen to certain events, and then you can take actions based on that. I don't know.
I mean,
or do we suggest that people have to connect individually? Because the thought, what I don't like about listening to kernels directly is that now all of a sudden, if you imagine you're gonna try to write such a monitoring service. Now you have to find out where every kernel pops up, and when a kernel is restarted, its sockets are going to be on different ports.
Well, to me, that suggests that if you had a custom kernel manager that implemented this functionality, then that it would be the job of your custom kernel manager to keep track of the last idle message, and then upon timeout to disconnect that kernel.
But I think it all depends on what someone is deploying, right? If they're deploying entire notebook servers for each user, then you want to monitor the notebook server. If you're deploying individual kernels, then it would be the individual kernels. And part of what, I mean, a long while back, I spent some time working on the design of how you would scale and deploy the notebook on the public internet, basically. And this was one of the core issues that I looked at. And basically, my conclusion is that what you actually need to do is extremely dependent on exactly what you're building, on the details of what you're building.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how. I mean, those at the kernel level, those events are already being broadcast, or at least some of those events are. They may want to kill the kernel on different signals that we're not broadcasting. And I mean, if you think about someone deploying entire notebook servers, they're on the public internet. Those servers are in containers, and there's some. It's hard for me to be able to know what signal they would want without knowing the exact details of how they're deploying and managing.
Okay, but what we're being asked for at the moment is not about shutting down notebook servers. It's about shutting down kernels. So, but I think that's a much easier thing to deal with because, as Paul said, a custom kernel manager could deal with that. We have something that already starts and stops kernels and can monitor their messages and things. So let's focus on the bit that somebody actually wants at the moment, and if somebody wants further down the road to deploy multiple notebook servers, then we can work that out as a separate question.
And so in this case, they're assuming that notebook server will continue to run, but that they want to kill a particular kernel for that notebook server.
But in my mind, the only question is, are we? I think the only thing that should be our problem is, are we not emitting any particular event that we should to make that possible? Because the moment we are emitting everything, well, then we should say, well, this is your problem. You go write your custom kernel manager, or you go write your own monitor service, and you do this, right? Precisely because I agree with Brian that this is so use case dependent on what is it that the person is actually trying to do, that we're never going to parameterize in any way that makes anyone happy.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The only question that I think we should ask is there anything missing from the data that we emit?
Yes, and I think there is, which is, I don't think the kernel manager has any current way of telling whether, when clients disconnect and how many clients are connected. And one way we can do that is monitoring WebSocket disconnection. As we've discussed, that's unreliable for various reasons. You could also have the JavaScript. I was looking at this the other day. I think it is possible to do an AJAX thing from a browser tab as it's closing. So, I mean, we could have a ping that says, this tab is actually closing. It's not just a disconnection.
So you can do that, but it's not reliable. And so I don't think you would want to rely on this as the only way. Like, I think if you ran a real infrastructure and deployment based on that logic, you would end up with kernels leaking.
Yes, but then you could have a backup mechanism based on the kernel idle messages, and if you haven't done anything with it for half an hour or whatever, then it assumes that it can kill that. But at the moment, the kernel manager does not have any way of knowing about clients connecting and disconnecting, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I guess I don't. And this is where, what if someone disconnects, but the kernel's still running and they're going to come back in an hour? Like, I guess I don't think client connection status is.
Well, but this is policy for the site running it, right? So we leave it up to them to deal with the ramifications of that, and that's why I on this PR originally I said exactly what Fernando ended up saying as well, is that we should make it possible to do this. We shouldn't even ship it as a feature.
Yeah.
We may perhaps at most ship an example of this, but have other people implement their own versions of what it means to do this, because trying to make all parties happy that are going to want to use this is just
impossible.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should do anything with client side JavaScript tricks, because it's so unreliable as not to be worth doing.
Yeah,
I mean, if it's one of those things where you have this data that most of the time you can't believe, why even bother with it? If you have to fall back, so I would rather add or ask, do we need to add a layer of event broadcasting that is the trustworthy event data, and those are actions that the server knows about, and then somebody can implement, if we emit those events, somebody can implement policy based on those events. And the events that I can think of is the browser, the server gets a save request. So that is, when the server gets a save request, that is an action that indicates the client is actually alive and connected, right? When the server receives an execute request or any other message, it can ping. So the question is, should the server simply broadcast basically pings of activity on a given event channel that are both signaling kernel side activity and that are signaling client side activity, and then people can implement whatever they want based on that data.
So here's a question. If someone, let's say we implemented that API, how would someone in the back end actually implement the killing? Would they have to make an HTTP connection and make an AJAX call to kill that kernel?
I think this should be done within the server. This should be done like as part of the kernel manager or something.
but then they're writing a custom notebook server.
And maybe that's the answer for now, Brian. That maybe for now you have to implement fancy policy, you have to basically you have to run a server with a custom kernel manager.
Yeah, I think
now
that
we
seems
may want.
But the problem is then that the information is being broadcast to an external process, but the process that can actually do the killing is the original process.
But then you don't need the external process.
By broadcasting, maybe it's just broadcast internally, right? Maybe it's just maybe we don't broadcast. Maybe instead of putting, as I said, I was just brainstorming. Maybe instead of broadcasting on ZeroMQ, we just emit an event, and the default handler for that event is a no-op. But then if you want to do something, you implement that handler in the actual kernel manager. So there's events that are sent to the kernel manager there's a set of events that are sent to it that indicate activity coming from various sources, and the default implementation just ignores them. And then we tell people, look, that's where you implement policy. That's what's going to be receiving these events. And then whatever crazy policy you want to implement, you do it. If you want to give people 10 minutes of idle time, if you want to write it to a disk and send them an email, if you want to shut it down and send them an SMS, all the possible madness that can come out of there is up to the users, and we simply say this is the method or methods where that happens.
So I'm realizing the one place where we will also need to possibly implement our own policies is with the multi-user notebook server. Like we will eventually face this issue ourselves. I agree that we should not, like the single user notebook server should not have any policies implemented for this. Mm-hmm. But, as other people start to build on top of the multi-user notebook server, this will become more of an issue. And I'm wondering if we actually want, I guess what I'm wondering is, do we want a separate ZeroMQ channel, sort of the private back-end way of talking to a notebook server that sees these events being broadcast and can actually send messages to perform particular actions. Otherwise,
so the question is, do we do it over ZeroMQ, or do we do it over the HTTP REST API?
Well, the issue is that particular deployments may have those HTTP connections may be authenticated with the particular user credentials that we don't want to have to authenticate as ourselves. Like this is the admin API,
the admin port,
or something, and that way it has the signals, it has the actions, and we never have to write the policy. Everyone can sort of manage their own infrastructure for that themselves.
That's the slightly more elaborate version, which is to say we do put it on a port, but then it means that we basically have to define an API of actions on what we accept. It's kind of it's effectively a control protocol for a few actions.
Well, and the other thing I'm thinking of is the reason this user wants to kill kernels is because it costs them money. And if you're deploying the notebook in that type of setting, you actually want the kernel starting and stopping information to propagate up to a higher level than that single notebook, because that's going to be related potentially to billing or your cost, or like it's a financially relevant bit of information.
But we're even going to face that in like at Berkeley. We're going to face this pretty soon, because we are looking at how to see if we can deploy some of this with some campus services, and so even if it's not billing in the customer sense, we do need to basically know how many of those resources are being used. So I think this is going to come up earlier than we thought, even for our own multi-user.
Yeah, so I would be in favor of us doing something like an IPAP to explore these ideas. And I completely agree that we should not implement policy for the single user notebook server. but that we should have a good scalable way of managing a server in this way and monitoring these events.
And the first level of decisions is basically to say, do we emit this stuff internally? Meaning that if implementing policy would be done purely by like subclassing and implementing methods that respond to internal things, or do we implement? Do we actually think of it as an outside-facing thing where we do put these things on, say, a 0MQ port, and then we basically formalize the protocol a little bit. And I can see advantages in both directions. I think I would lean, even though it's more complex in the long run, we probably are going to end up with the open-facing one. Though I think we're going to end up there, but it is more complicated.
I think we should start with the internal thing, and because I mean we have nearly all of what we need for that. We need some extra events really, and that is it. And you know, if at some later date we want to make an external control protocol that things can talk over 0MQ, I think that is really pretty much orthogonal to this.
Well, the issue I have with that is that it makes implementing the policy very difficult because someone has to build a customized, and part of it is that the current notebook, the current kernel manager is not event-based. And so there's this whole issue of how do you wedge this new event model into the kernel manager.
Yeah, I'm not completely convinced that doing it internally is what we want to jump into right away, because then we're back to XKCD 1172 that Jason pointed out. I mean, the moment if we go down that road, because it seems appealing initially, it's like, well, all of a sudden, now that implementation is considered official API, and if we later decide that we want to do this differently, now we're stuck maintaining that API. We just went through -- script.
But if it's going to be external, then there has to be internal API to implement the external API. So you don't get around doing the internal API, you just have to do an external API as well.
No, but it may look completely different than what we're talking about. It may be, I mean, what I don't want to do is jump immediately into the implementation that says it's an event that goes into a custom kernel manager, and that's going to be the solution for now, because it may be that the design of an externally facing 0MQ control port looks completely different. And now we have this funky thing on the inside that was done for this case that actually doesn't match the later use case. So I would just let's slow down. Let's just slow. I mean, we don't need to implement this right now. There's a complicated enough design question here that we can think about it without providing an implementation. I mean, we just went through a conversation where having implemented something, now we're dragging it around, and we don't need to do this right now.
But I mean, I'm applying a similar argument to the 0MQ socket. I think having the control socket like in the discussion is getting way ahead of ourselves before we even have the multi-user server. You know, that's currently something that we know we may need something like that at some point, and we're trying to design that into an API that really doesn't have much to do with it. You know, we can implement this entirely without a 0MQ socket, and if you want a custom way to manage kernels, you have a custom kernel manager. That doesn't seem terribly controversial.
Well, so I agree with you that we don't want to get too far into designing the 0MQ thing before we have the actual usage case to figure out what that design should look like. But my feeling is that the 0MQ version of this will be much simpler and cleaner than the internal version.
But you need the internal machinery there anyway.
Well, the way our managers work is that they're all blocking and synchronous, and we layer the asynchronous stuff on top of that with the event loop. Yeah, but the actual low-level manager objects don't have the event loop, and so we have this nice layered approach. And this external service, the 0MQ service, we could keep that layered approach where we have a new event handler thing in the top layer that's asynchronous. It calls down into the lower level APIs that are blocking. And doing it using the internal thing, we would have to make that lower level asynchronous. And so I think you're right. there will need to be internal APIs in both cases. It's a question of which of those APIs can be synchronous and which need to be asynchronous. And I think it's going to be easier to do the external 0MQ version of it. But
I think that sounds hugely more complicated, but...
Well, no, but Thomas, I think the point that Brian and I are trying to make is that we want to just slow down for a second and think about the design of these pieces together, because it's perfectly possible that if we implement right away this one part in this way, it actually, there's a huge impedance mismatch with the rest of the design, and that stuff. This stuff is not like far out into the future. The multi-user server is coming along quickly, and we are going to be looking at testing this stuff, literally potentially in the next couple of months.
But
so
I think the pieces you're talking about are more or less orthogonal. I mean, you could already write a custom kernel manager that killed kernels after they had been inactive, as in no messages sent to or from the kernel for a certain amount of time. That would be...
Which means that people have a way to do this right now. They can subclass all they want and have their custom code all they want.
But they don't have a way to do what the person is actually asking for, which is things like, WebSocket disconnect. They don't have a way for that to integrate with save events. So, it doesn't know that it doesn't know when you save a notebook for the idle timeout.
Well, again,
I think there's a relatively small piece that, we just need to make it possible for the kernel manager to detect a couple more pieces of information, and this can essentially be...
I mean, I'm fine with us looking at this. I mean, I guess the way I've cast the next thing is write an IPEP to explore these things. And if it turns out that we can make minor changes to the kernel manager and get there in a way that doesn't preclude future development with 0MQ, I'm fine with that. My initial thought is that the internal stuff will be more complex, and that 0MQ brings a level of clean design and sanity that's really helpful. But I'm fine with us looking at this to see. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe we can add a few things. It's not very complex.
The whole thing of having the notebook server controllable over a 0MQ socket, or probably a pair of 0MQ sockets, it seems orthogonal to... I mean, you could add 0MQ control to a lot of the things that are already there. I don't see why this particular thing is where we're saying, now we need a 0MQ channel to do things.
Because I think
I'm gonna have to run, guys. So I'll catch up later. I have to run.
Right.
Okay. So I think the main difference for me is that in most of the usage cases that I can think of, the notification and policy making and decision making about these things usually will need to happen external to individual notebook servers. That's the main abstraction question, and that's I think the main thing I'm thinking of. Right? Someone needs to look at their overall infrastructure usage to see, oh my gosh, can we even allow this notebook server to start a new kernel, or is it on a host that has 99% of its RAM taken, and we need to say no, sorry, you can't start a kernel right now, or I'm going to be aggressive about killing these kernels. And so that's why I think the 0MQ is, having an external entity in the picture is relevant. But so who else? Hold on, let me see. So do you guys? Can we? We've chased everyone away.
Yeah, should we?
Wait,
So
I have a quick question before we suspend. Can I demo something for you?
Sure.
Sure.
God, John, that's unacceptable.
That's unacceptable.
Wow, that
Okay.
echo's unacceptable.
Alright. Alright, can you see yourselves? Alright, sweet.
Oh my God! Wait, share our screen.
So I'm working on getting rid of the pager right now, and
Brian's
I was
very
just
good.
trying like a different alternative approach, and I've been using, this is glitching a little bit, but I've been using a thing like this, and this sits in between, it's actually sitting in between the widgets and the output, so it's a separate little thing, and you can undock it and move it around if you want, and redock it and close it and reopen it. It reopens in the state that you left it in, so if you have it undocked.
If you undock it and send something else there.
Yeah, if you undock, no, so there's only one. So if this was like a different tooltip, then it would, here, let me see. It's supposed to work. Looks like it didn't work. Wait, no. Is that working?
And is it when
Oh, I see. It's pulling up the wrong.
when you say there's only one, is that one per page or one per output?
There you go. That's one per cell.
Okay.
So one per output.
So one issue. Where's the echo coming from? I can't.
It's from John.
I'm sorry. Wait, hold on. Let me turn up my volume.
John.
Testing. I can still hear myself.
Okay, hold on. Mute myself.
Go.
So we've talked quite a bit about the possibility of pager output being MIME bundles. And in that context, all the security issues of output come into play. It's not just plain text.
Mm-hmm.
Why not just do the same thing, but just put it as output? So we...
That's what Min has it. That's how Min has gotten rid of the pager.
Yeah, he puts it as output.
Yep.
No,
And then what happens if you display the pager twice? Does it delete the old one?
Yeah.
I can do that.
No. Why can't there just be multiple pager outputs so multiple cells can have? I mean, it's no longer a singleton. It's just more output.
Yeah. Sorry. So it deletes that cell's output, but if you rerun a cell, but yeah, there's no such thing as a pager. There's no such thing. The payload just goes as output. It's as though you send it to standard out or whatever. So it's all of
and then I could make the output undockable and the output.
I think you can make it undockable.
No, I think that's.
Undockable.
I think the making it undockable. I mean, Min doesn't like it, but Min is not a general guide to our user base. And Matthias, for instance, Matthias very much likes having the pager thing as a separate thing from the output area. I'm inclined to, I quite like having the ability to have a separate area. I think we do need to have the docking and undocking thing. It's not enough to just take the pager away and have text.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled about the dockability thing, but I also realize that there's a lot of people who use that and like it, and so I'm fine with us doing it. So John,
yeah,
is it fairly easy to? Can you mute yourself so I can?
Yeah, I just have to. I have to stay on this.
Yeah, we can mute you for you.
Is it fairly easy for you to write a generic JavaScript class for dockable things in the notebook?
Yeah, that's what I did. So I took all the code from the pop-up widget and made it completely generic and just put it in utils. Hold on, I'm going to bend my headphones so I don't have to mute myself. Okay, you shouldn't hear yourself.
Testing.
Yep.
Oh, but I can't hear you. Oh, there we go.
Then why don't you try doing the docking thing to the entire output area, and just redirecting the pager payload messages
To the output area.
to output area.
Okay, yeah, I can totally do that. And should I put? Do you guys think I should like have some sort of styling on the pager so you know it's a pager message? Like even if it's not this, something.
I would start out without it, and then let's go from there. I mean, I don't know. Like let's look at what it looks like without any additional styling, because
That's reasonable.
the pager comes in with colorized text, right?
Yeah, that's what you see here.
Well, but you've also made it blue.
Oh yeah, that the blue is bootstrapped. That's supposed to be black, but that's part of this bootstrap alert thing.
White, you mean?
Or
Oh,
white.
I think John's talking about the text.
I'm
Paul's
talking about the text.
Oh, I'm talking about
okay.
the
No, yeah, I'm talking about the text. The black text is blue here.
And John, is it also easy to have it so that you can dock it in the output area, you can float it around? Is it also easy to make it like dock to the bottom or to the side?
Yeah, it's doing that right now. So see, it snaps to the sides.
Maybe
you can't
and
see.
sort of take up the full.
Oh, you mean kind of like how Microsoft does it, where you drag it to the bottom and it would span
Sort
the
of.
whole width?
Yeah.
The way the old pager used to work. The way the pager works.
Yeah, I think I could do that. At least with the bottom of the page, that shouldn't be a problem. But like having it, I don't know if I could detect like here where I'm snapping to the top. I don't know if I could generically detect what I was snapping to and what the width of that was or height. Like if I'm snapping to the left here. The
top is less important.
Just the bottom.
The bottom and the right, I think, are the places where people are most likely to want it. I'm thinking of the right-hand side, especially on widescreen monitors.
Ooh, that was kind of cool. Look at this.
Yeah, that behavior is probably not what we want.
Why?
Right, can you go?
So I think we should start with just sort of snapping to the sides.
That's what it does now.
Yeah, and just see how that feels. And also, can we make? I mean, this is total nitpick visual stuff. It looks like the icons for closing and redocking are different weights than the rest of our icons on the page.
Yeah, they are. I mean, so I'm using the font awesome classes. Is there a way to change the font awesome class size? Like a quick, like FA small or something? Or?
Yeah, there's like an FA tiny or something that.
Or they may have different weights. I don't know. I'd have to look to see what's causing the bigger weights.
Everything is font awesome.
Everything is. Yeah, we've been playing
Brian,
Lego.
were you playing with a Lego chain? I was like recognizing that.
Yeah, I have played a lot of Lego this week. Let's put it that way.
Awesome.
Both of my kids are under the weather, so we've been.
That's not awesome.
Sure. So you can see right here, I've got a full-on Lego.
Nice.
Lego
walkie-talkies.
Yep. So, I mean, because I'm going to be gone next week, could we talk about a few other things? Can you guys stick around for a few minutes? Or
yeah, we're here until Fernando says he's coming in at lunch at 1, so we're here at least until then.
Okay. So the scroll manager. So the idea of this is, Paul, this is based on your scrolling idea.
Oh, the Paul scroll.
Yeah, Paul scroll. So the way this works is that there's a scroll manager API, and there are basically that scroll manager JavaScript object determines how the notebook scrolls. And there's a couple, I think John has implemented 3 versions in this PR. Mm-hmm. One is that spacebar and shift space will smooth scroll the notebook up and down. So it's slightly different than the current behavior in master. In master, spacebar and shift space jump pages.
Yeah.
In this, it's a smooth animation. The second version will scroll between H1, heading 1s, and then the last version scrolls between different slides.
Where slides are determined by metadata?
By the metadata.
Okay.
And so the question is, do we want this in master? And then the next is, what about the UI?
Yeah.
So, as someone who rarely uses the keyboard to scroll, I will jump straight into this discussion. And I think the smooth scrolling, if we can get the timing right and things so it looks natural, I think that should probably be on by default.
Yeah, it's much nicer.
Really?
I mean,
I smooth scrolling in browsers when you have lots of graphics and things like that. I find that to be a terrible experience, actually.
Just because it jumps, or
because it stutters, because it's not smooth.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. I haven't played with that part of it, and we should test that out.
So in master, space and shift space do nothing currently, right? At least they're doing nothing for me.
It depends on your browser.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's whatever and your settings.
So with default settings,
I didn't look at the code. Is it implemented using our shortcut system? Because if it is, okay, so then that's good, because at least then that's easily disableable, if I can term a thing. Okay, so that's fine.
So the scrolling between heading cells, we kind of ran into a problem with this in discussions here, which is that if you set that and then you want to scroll to things that aren't heading cells, then Paul has been making heading cells and then having not headings in them.
That's what the slide scroller's for. So then you explicitly set what's a slide and what's not a slide.
I'm kind of minus 0.5 on that, because I don't want to encourage people to put like lots of stuff into heading cells, because that kind of defeats the point of them being heading cells.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you mean. Yeah. So, I mean.
And is there a way? Sorry, go ahead, Brian. I'll hold my thought.
I think I'm trying to figure out exactly the questions we have to answer. Maybe one question is, do we want the abstraction of the scroll manager at all? And then the second question is, which of the scroll managers that John has implemented do we want to ship? And my feeling is that the scroll manager API in general is really useful. Even if we didn't ship any but the most basic one, well, I could put a custom one in my custom JS and manage scrolling however I want. And so I like that. I think part of this is that I think we should support some sort of slideshow presentation mode, namely because we do support the slideshow metadata already. I mean, it's not an extension; it's built in. And the third scroll manager that John has implemented that looks at the slide metadata is the only slideshow mode that I've actually seen for the live notebook that feels sort of robust and it works really well.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I like well, not having used them again. Conceptually I like the default one and the going by slide one.
So the going by slide one, it just defaults to the default one if you're already past the last slide cell, it will. So when you click space, if you're already past the last slide, then it will just jump a single page. And if the same thing goes the other way around, if you're above the first slide and you do Shift Tab to scroll up, it will just scroll up a page instead of not doing anything. So.
But if you're above, if you're like, 3 pages above the first slide point, and you press space, it will zoom all the way down to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's. Yeah, I might consider having a. This will go to the next slide, but at most 1 page, so that you can, pressing space, you will have a chance to see all of the document as you go through it.
But
that defeats the purpose.
Yeah, that really defeats the
case is that I would put all of my sort of nitty-gritty code that I want to skip over up at the top, and then have my title slide be the first thing that scrolls to. So
yeah, I guess so.
It's tricky. The other question is how hard is it to mix this in terms of like mixing the H1 and the heading and the explicit slide behavior?
It shouldn't be hard at all. There's like a base class that both the H1 and the slide metadata scrollers inherit from, and they have a method that just says, is this a cell I'm interested in? And so you could override that and just combine both. You could say it's a cell you're interested in if it's a header, or if it has slide defined on it.
So if we made the slide scrolling the default thing, then that would behave like the other default thing for someone who doesn't use the slide metadata at all.
Exactly.
And if you start using the slide metadata, then it just picks up your slides automatically. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a really nice default, actually. I mean, and part of it is that I don't know that a lot of people use spacebar and shift space to navigate notebooks already. I mean, what's your sense?
Well, it doesn't work for me, so
It's entirely conjecture. That is a behavior that I make work for myself, just because that's the way I browse the web. Basically, is that I page through pages by spacebar, shift spacebar.
Okay. No, so I guess it depends on how people are used to me or working with browsers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, do you think it's that the selection of the scroller should be something that's done in custom.js or in an actual UI?
Custom.js.
No, yeah, custom.js for sure.
Yeah, we don't need UI for this.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and yeah, maybe if since this is already a PR, maybe add a note to about how to enable slideshow mode, because this is the first time we'll be shipping a slideshow mode out of the box, right?
Yeah. So here, let me. So scroll manager. Oops, I didn't want to do that. I want to do this. Okay.
So it would default to the basic, and it wouldn't detect slides, or it would default to the mode that was smart about slides.
I think we should default to the mode that's smart about slides.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although I still wonder if possibly the default should be paged, to a slide, but a maximum of a page, so that if I happen to somehow make a slide right at the bottom of my notebook, a slide, then pressing space doesn't immediately jump all the way down to it. But yeah, I hear the other argument on that one.
Yeah. So so let's make the default the slideshow mode. Configure the others with custom.js. Do we want to ship all 3?
Well, one of them's a base class for the others, so I don't see why
it's either
not.
2 or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine shipping all three, actually.
I'm kind of, as I said, minus 0.5 on the heading cells one, because it seems to encourage people to use heading cells in a way that we'd rather they didn't use heading cells.
Yeah, it's true.
But I mean,
You'd rather they not use heading cells, right?
Yes, but at the same time, if it's not enabled by default and you have to go into custom.js to enable it, then I'm not overly concerned that we're encouraging misbehavior. So
Yeah, I think I would prefer to leave it in. I could imagine situations where, I want to do a really quick, lightweight slideshow, and I don't want to take the time to go put in all the metadata, and I know, well, every time I want to start a new slide, it's an H1.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that we have keyboard shortcuts out of the box for making something into a heading, and we don't for making something into a slideshow-enabled slide,
Yes.
was the entire reason that at PyData, within a half hour before my talk, I asked John for this. Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it is honestly a little tedious if I have a long talk to go and manage the slide metadata.
Yep.
And I probably...
Perhaps we need someone to write keyboard shortcuts for managing slide metadata.
And obviously, I could
likes writing keyboard shortcuts.
Well, let's start with all three of them in for now, and we can keep reviewing it.
Sure.
Yeah.
See what others think. Okay. Usability testing. This one will be fast.
Oh, wait, did you skip over notebook docs on
I
purpose?
did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, fine. Go.
So the basic idea is that I think we should start to do usability testing to give us actual information about how non-IPython developers experience our software.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing some research, and it looks like the best, we could actually try to do in-person usability tests. The challenge there is just a lot of coordination. Our universities might consider that to be testing that involve human subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And so that may trigger a bunch of additional paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
But there is usertesting.com, which looks like it is the industry standard. You basically pay $50 and they find someone to test your software. And for highly technical stuff, this would not be useful because you can only screen testers by gender, age, income, country, and web expertise. You can ask custom questions like, you need to know how to program. And if you want more details than that, you have to sign up for an enterprise account, and then you can actually send your own testers to usertesting.com. So we could recruit people from our community to go and do tests for us. I talked a little bit with Kyle about setting up some Docker containers that allow us to test particular branches. And I view this as a long-term project. There's no hurry that we need to have this done in the next week. But the main thing is to start to gather, to literally watch our users use our software and see, oh wow, like when we asked them to do this task, they couldn't find that link, or like.
Can I ask that we defer this to a discussion another week, because I know Min feels very strongly about how much data we can actually get out of user testing, and I don't necessarily agree with his views, but I think we should have the discussion with him here rather
But the problem is Brian's not here next week.
Or the week after that, or something. You said this is a long-term
I
thing.
just wanted, And I think part of Min's objection, and I completely agree with Min, is some of the excessive data-driven approach that some people have used to make nitpicky decisions. I think the famous one is Google doing usability studies to figure out precisely what color blue their link should be. And this is a different kind of usability testing this is more based on the type of testing that's described in Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think, and it's absolutely not quantitative, it's qualitative. But absolutely, we should talk about this with other people here. I at least wanted to bring it up because it's been on the agenda for 2 weeks, and I know it's a longer discussion.
Yeah.
And part of this came about in talking with Greg Wilson at SciPy about, like, how can we start to improve our user interface without just making guesses. and this is some of what came out of that discussion, that, you know, we could actually do some studies and see, you know. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just another point about this is we should think about adding instrumentation to our code to keep track of these events. I mean, if this is really a longer-term thing, because imagine this. Here's the thing. Here's what you do. Software Carpentry already ships to a lot of their attendees virtual machines that they use. Or, at the very least, I've been working with some Software Carpentry people on a custom notebook profile, right?
Yes.
So we can put whatever we want. We can add this stuff to a brand new attendee, right, a Software Carpentry attendee, that will give us data about how exactly, like, how many times they clicked on what. Like, we could have that level of like, here are the features that they absolutely never click. Like, they never click the help menu, or they never click the UI buttons, or things like that. Go ahead, Brian. You look like you're...
No, and so I should clarify. So an outline of what this type of user testing looks like is that you give the user a set of tasks to perform, and this website videos the user performing those tasks in their web browser. It videos their mouse motion, and then the users basically talk into the microphone as they perform these actions. And so the thing that you get back, like the result of a test, is that you get a video where you're watching a user perform these tasks and describing their experience. You get zero quantitative data. I mean, literally, you do not get any quantitative data other than the video itself. I think the type of the more quantitative approach, I think it still is important. I agree with Min that there's extremes that we don't want to go to, but knowing, like, do people in software carpentry ever figure out where they can look for keyboard shortcuts? Or does that never ever, like, they never ever touch that? That would be really useful to know.
But at the same time, yeah, even if people from software carpentry may not touch the keyboard shortcut things, but, you know, the keyboard shortcuts are there for not the kind of people that software carpentry users are. So
no, absolutely. And
even if someone never touches it, we're pretty limited in what we can actually draw from that.
Well, but you could imagine that would help us to better understand how can we better serve people like software carpentry, who are not ever touching the keyboard shortcuts. I mean, I agree, we wouldn't remove the keyboard shortcuts, but...
Like, for me, the user interface tour, I would love to know how many people clicked on that and went through it. I suspect very few. Even though it's...
The user interface what?
The user interface tour.
Yes. No, that would be... Yeah. No, that would be really useful. And so, and a lot of this, I mean, from what I've been reading about everyone's experience of doing these types of user tests completely changes how they look at their software in a really good way. Like, oh my gosh, we had no idea that when people were going to our website that they were having these problems or these confusions, or and this might be the type of thing that would be great to hire an undergrad at Cal Poly to help us organize, not to actually like run the tests, but to help us sort of figure out how do we actually carry this out and get it organized and do things.
Again, though, I think we should wait for Min to have these discussions, because
absolutely,
you know, we're talking about $50 a test plus hiring someone to organize it. You know, we're talking about non-trivial amounts of money, and I think at least one of our team really disagrees with you on how valuable this is. So
yeah,
but I mean, discussion another day.
Yeah, no, I totally. I completely agree that we need to have this discussion, probably with Fernando and Min here.
Yeah, of course. But I'm thinking Min in particular because I know he strongly disagrees with you on this topic.
I think you're overstating the disagreement.
I've talked to Min about it. I don't think I am.
Okay, because I actually agree with Min on a lot of things on this. So I don't know, but maybe he's not expressed to me the point of disagreement.
Pager?
But
oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we did the pager.
Please, can we remove it now?
Yeah, no, but the one other comment about usability testing is that we are without excuse, in the sense that we need to be taking every step possible to improve our user interface, and sticking our heads in the sand and not doing any sort of user testing, I think, is just not excusable. How it happens and how it looks, that's totally up for discussion. But to pretend that we shouldn't study how users are using our software at all is not. And I don't think Min believes that. The notebook docs, so Matthias has looked at them. He has left some comments that I'll review.
Yeah, he's left a comment on the hackpad saying it really feels like documentation written by an expert, and here and there are too many assumptions that the user already knows things. But if it's easier to merge essays and iterate in master, then he doesn't mind that.
Yeah, I mean, my problem is I've been working on this stuff for months now, and it's a huge change. And I know over the next, I'm traveling for 6 weeks straight, starting on Saturday.
Oh, Jesus.
I know. And so I just don't know if... Yeah, I'm worried about this pull request basically generating conflicts on any change to that content in other pull requests.
Do you feel like this should be 3.0, or is this post 3.0, or is this 3.0 with some more work that you need us to help?
Well, originally this was going to be even backported to 2.x. I think we're past that point. I think this definitely is 3.0 though.
Okay. Well, if it's 3.0, I think we should merge it, and then more eyes will. Then we can update things. I mean, there's no harm in having extra thing, like right? Like, what's the harm? There's no functionality in there. It's all narrative, right?
No, and it represents a significant cleanup of this part of our docs. Mm-hmm. I mean, it definitely is. I consider it to be an improvement. I mean, it still may need iteration, but compared to what was there before, this is definitely improved. and there's a lot of duplicate content that was removed. And so it is, yeah. Well, let me at least address some of Matthias's comments, and then I'll ping you guys to see if we can merge it.
Sounds good. Yeah. Because I mean, I used to do more stuff on the docs. I used to pop in there every once in a while. It's just, and ever since you raised that flag of like, don't do anything to it, we've got this one. I'm like, okay.
No, and it's horrible. I mean, it's very, and this, honestly, authoring content collaboratively like this is still so painful. Mm-hmm. And I honestly, part of me feels like maybe we should edit this type of content on Google Docs or something. But I don't know. It's really unfortunate that for one person to make edits like this, it has to block everyone. That feels, and also just the review of it.
Well, how about this, Brian? How about we close this PR and open it? You push it to a branch, and then we can all edit it. Or you see what I mean?
You mean an IPython org branch?
Yeah, IPython org branch. So we're all so that I mean, it's that would be more collaborative, right? That means that instead of it saying, hey, Brian, could you make this change, or me issuing a pull request against you, waiting for you to hit the merge button, we could all just trust each other and let Git do its thing. Or whatever, or not.
No, I'm fine either way. It depends if, yeah, I mean it. Yeah, I still feel like our workflow for written documentation, I mean, for Sphinx it's better because the diffs are readable. Yeah, I don't know. Part of it is that the IPython in depth, our tutorial content, is now based on this content. And so when people go to IPython in depth, they're redirected to IPython examples, but to my special branch.
Oh.
So so I think, yeah, I guess I think we should probably merge it as soon as we can,
Okay.
and just keep iterating in master, especially because it's not like this is code that is used as official APIs or anything. I mean, it's quote just document.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know if Fernando told you, Brian, we met yesterday at lunchtime with a woman called Imelda, I think, and she is a technical writer and is interested in getting involved with IPython, and we've asked her to start by doing kind of a kind of business analytics style report on how IPython looks from an external perspective.
Nice.
So
that's
basically she's gonna give us the fresh perspective. She doesn't know much about IPython, and so she's gonna give us the like, what do we externally look like to the world?
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, yeah. That's great.
Back to examples though briefly. So what do you think the story will be for shipping these or users getting their hands on this? Because right now it's in the Git repo, right? Say we merge it, it's in the Git repo. None of those files get shipped out when you pip install IPython. None of those land when you conda install IPython, right? So what's going to be the story there?
Yeah, I think we need to do the same thing with NB Viewer that we do with our docs, and that is NB Viewer should have links to are stable releases and the dev branch version of this content.
But how does,
Right.
because a lot of these notebooks are interactive, right? So is the user experience, I go to NB Viewer to download notebook by notebook? I'm just asking. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, no. I mean, so far our official quote public viewing location for these things is NB Viewer, and for the interactive stuff, obviously today it doesn't work very well. If we get static widgets done for 3.0, I think we could update those examples so that they work reasonably well in NB Viewer, but that's a separate. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we're still in the dark ages of documentation for sure.
Well, I feel like what would help would be to an IPython maybe some API of either fetching those documents or extracting them, including them in the like sort of in the wheel or whatever, and being able to dump them into a user place, because it's.
So the trouble with Python installation is that you can put stuff in the package directory, or you can put data files which will be just dumped somewhere and we don't really know where. And I don't think we want to try and include a bunch of docs and examples and things in the wheels, because the reason we made wheels in the first place is so that there is a minimal installation that is quick to download, quick to unpack.
Sure, but if there's no, but then there's no, that doesn't say anything about going against having an API that fetches those documents from somewhere. The way that we can install MathJax locally, you should be able to install examples locally. Because I mean, those are
the API is requests.get. The API is requests.get. I don't feel like we need an API for downloading a bunch of static files.
So we've gone through the trouble of organizing the files in directories and things like that, right? And they live in our source tree. And so my experience of being able to go to that directory, start it in a notebook server in there, and be able to browse a whole bunch of documents is vastly better than the average user who would benefit from that documentation, who now has to go to, either has to git clone the entire repository, which they're not going to do, right? Or they go to NB Viewer and download them one by one in order to interact with them. And I'm just saying, I think there should be some bridge of being able to grab a bundle of those things, whether that's an API call that ships with IPython or a separate download link where we can say sort of download them all and it's a zip file that they unzip or something like that, but some way of getting those onto their machine.
The zip file is a reasonable way to do it, I think.
No, I mean, I think right now the help menu in the live notebook server has an NB Viewer link to this content.
Yeah.
And I think eventually that should point to locally installed versions of those notebooks the user can actually run in place, and yeah, no, and that's, I mean, there's a lot here we have to tackle, especially to figure out how do other language kernels provide their equivalent of this type of documentation, right? I mean, in principle, Julia would want to ship notebooks that describe how to use the notebook from Julia or things like that, and it's a hard problem. It really is, and I think we just have to keep sort of slowly moving in the right direction. But I can talk to Kyle and Matthias about adding links on NB Viewer to the latest development version of these things and distinguishing between latest stable and latest development. So, so people can at least start to view them on NB Viewer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I mean,
you don't actually need a link from the front page to view things on NB Viewer, though. I mean, we can post links on the mailing list and things without having to modify the front page. I mean, we have each link on the front page takes up quite a lot of space.
Well, the direction we're moving is that this is our documentation. I mean and so it should be like when someone goes to ipython.org/documentation, there should be a link to the Sphinx docs for dev and NBViewer for dev. And there should be a link to Sphinx for 2.0 and NBViewer for 2.0. Like that, this is. Maybe
pull
that's
requests
not
against the website.
Yeah, and maybe maybe that's different than it being on the homepage of NBViewer, but I do view this as this is where we're documenting the details about the notebook.
Yeah, I think it would be sufficient just to, we already have IPython at the front page, and maybe that's where it currently says IPython documentation. Maybe there's some other UI element that tells you that this is the dev or this is the 2x version. Click here for dev version, click here for 1x or whatever, click here for 3x. Or not without being 3x, but sort of just explicitly saying this is 2x. And then being able to click somewhere else to get the dev version. That's fine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think part of this is just adding links on the documentation page on IPython.org.
All right, let's bring this meeting to a close because it's been going on for quite long enough.
I thought you said we had to talk till Fernando shows up for lunch.
That's right.
I think I can hear him.
He's lying over. He's holding me hostage.
All right.
Safe travels, Brian.
Goodbye, Internet.
Safe. Everything is awesome.
Yes.
When you're part of the team.
On which note?